Hello, I'm Mega. You already knew that. Maybe not. I don't know. It might be your first time here. And this is a trick. You see, even though it says that I'm live right now, it's an illusion. This freaking chat screen, get it out of here. Because there's no chat today. It's all pre recorded. Uh, and these are potentially something that I'm going to be doing in the future. Now I say this, what is this? I am going to potentially be throwing in some of the CR kind of bonus content, like what we're going to watch today, the Liam one shot, but potentially some other stuff as well. And if it goes well, maybe some other actual plays in this format. It's all going to be pre-recorded, but then I will kind of post it as a live, as a premiere, so you guys can still have the normal kind of live watching experience, at least, with other chatters. Obviously, I won't be there. And then I'll post these on weeks that I can't do Critical Eyes for whatever reason. And that way, even if I, have to take a random week off of Critical Eyes, like I might have to do next week, or I guess it'll actually be this week. It'll be right now for you because you won't see this until that happens. But I'm recording this a week ahead of time. Whoa, the magic. So yeah, if there's anything that I have to do in my real life, like next week is my anniversary, I might post one of these. And hopefully they can also potentially help me sort of conquer the much longer videos. And if there are things that I still really want to talk about with you guys, I really want to have that live interaction experience, we might just watch one of my own videos. I might post this, and then if people have a ton to say about it or talk about it, maybe we'll do like a comment review sort of stream. But without further ado, I'm actually going to go to the very normal Critical Eyes screen setup that y'all are used to. Obviously there'll be a lot of dead space because we're not having, chat and chat highlights. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I tried this with the Battle Royale, and it was because I wasn't super into the Battle Royale and I didn't have chat to sort of give me energy. But I'm really stoked to watch the Liam one shot. So I'm hoping that actually watching something that I'm interested in will make the format more viable. If not, maybe you'll never see this. So if you are, the format was viable. If you never do, I guess I'm talking to ghosts. So let's switch over to the recording screen. All right, like I said, if you watch Critical Eyes, pretty typical setup. We're probably not going to really need the notes screen, but I'm still going to have it there because I didn't want to make like an entirely new scene setup for this in case it doesn't go well. But if this does go well, then I'll make a whole new setup for it. And hopefully I'll be able to watch a lot of the things that people really want me to watch. I get messages, DMs, messages in Discord all the time asking, hey, will you watch blank? This actual play, just the first episode of this actual play, this one-shot series, all that sort of stuff. And I do want to watch all of that. It's just that Critical Eyes is a tough format. It's one that I love, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of strain on my voice. So if we can do this more kind of offline recording method where I can, maybe even like record in multiple sessions, I can take breaks during the middle of recording, that might make a lot of that sort of stuff more doable. So we're going to test it with the one shot. I'm psyched. I still have John's time codes for this one. So we're still going to be utilizing the time codes just like a normal Critical Eyes episode. And I'll probably be, honestly, a lot more lenient, I would say, with the actual like speed ups and timing and all that. I'll still speed it up for combat, and I'll still slow it down, or only minorly speed it up for the normal talking, but I think it'll go pretty well. So let's get into it. Okay, and we may or may not watch the post-session Q&A. I am theoretically interested, but we'll just have to see how the actual game goes. So let's strap in. Also, I'm not going to edit the vast majority of this except for like cutting out parts where I'm not talking. So like my normal amount of like repetition and tangents and all of that sort of stuff is all going to stay in as, a nice, raw recording. Let me know if you would be interested in it being a little bit more tightly edited, like cutting out some of the repetition, maybe making things a little bit shorter and cleaner and a little bit more concise. But right now, I'm going to opt on the low editing side of things. I'm just going to cut out all of the empty space, the dead air, and, any times that I like leave the recording setup. But like I said, let me know if you would be at all interested in a more highly produced version of this. Really, any feedback on this format. This is like executing the base idea, but this is certainly not the end of the idea's evolution. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode of Critical Role.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Critical Role.
No! Me and Taliesin are the same. I always do the woo, the ooga booga. It is very cute. I think I sometimes I see the little things that I'm like, oh, that's like one of the critter things. You know what I'm saying? That's one of the reasons that people are so like into Critical Role. And a lot of people always reference how Critical Role feels like an at-home game. And that sort of thing of like having those little like isms of, whenever the DM starts the session, or in this case, the stream. And I don't know, playing around with that is funny. It feels very real. So I sometimes I see those, I'm like, I get it. I get what the critters see. And when I say I get it, I'm starting to see it as well. I don't know. It's very, when I started this, I would never have, it explicitly was not a critter. I'd never watched anything. And throughout the series, it was always like, oh, from an outsider perspective, whatever, a non-critter perspective. But the further we get into it, and the more that I am thinking about and talking about Critical Role and starting to think and talk about it in my daily life, the more I have to be like, damn, am I a critter at this point? I don't know yet. I think it's hard to say, but I'm not as little of a critter as I was when I started.
I had 2 days to cobble together some stupid bullshit to do with my friends, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna see how it goes.
Dude, I actually love that he is giving the context of how much time this took. Like, for me personally, and honestly broadly, I think that's very, I don't know, for a larger campaign, and in a lot of contexts, I think it's sort of a protective shield. It's part of the illusion of DMing is you don't talk about how much time it took to prep. You don't talk about, how much prep you even had. Sometimes you lie about how much prep you even had, because it's all part of the, Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain sort of illusion of making the world feel bigger and more complicated and more real than it actually is. But for a one-shot, where we kind of know that the world is exactly as big as this one-shot, I actually really like it. And I like it as, a communication between kind of you and your players, letting them know what to expect a little bit. As well as, for me, watching this, it's nice to be able to see like, okay, this is what he put together in 2 days. Because I've talked about it many times. I don't feel like I'm very good at making one-shots. And so it'll be very cool to see what he could put together. And maybe, he's a bit more, I don't know, dedicated than I am sometimes. But yeah, we'll have to see. And maybe, hey, if this goes really well and I see what he can put together in 2 days as basically a non-experienced DM, like I don't think he has little to none in terms of DMing experience. And And if he puts together something that people like, which I've heard good things about this one shot, if he can put it together well, maybe I just need to fucking get over myself and, I don't know, make a one shot on stream or something. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Anything else going into this? I mean, kind of like I said with the other one shots, the other battle royale, you know, I have my bread and butter as a DM is long form homebrew campaigns. I have personally world built and ran like 7 at this point. Now, you know, you could say, hey, what happened to each one? It seems like they fizzled. Uh-oh, is that a mark against you? Maybe. But also, it's been over the course of me being a kid as well, and then being a busy career boy. Oh, man, should I do another take of that? No, there's no more takes. I can't get too used to the pre-recording. It has to be raw. It still has to be authentic. But, yeah, so that's all of my real experience is in those big homebrew campaigns. So, like, modules, one-shots, weird off-kilter formats like the Battle Royale. I haven't done anything like that. So, when I'm watching these, I am still going to like critique them, but it'll be much more from an analysis point of perspective or point of view, I guess. Point of perspective. Much more from an analysis point of view where I am looking at, okay, I want to run things like this eventually. And when I run this, what parts do I like? What parts do I not? Did he do a little thing there that I especially like or that I really want to avoid? That's really where my head's at when I'm watching this, is not even like, you know, because sometimes when I'm watching the big homebrew, you know, regular Vox Machina show, there's an amount of like an educational element where I'm talking and like kind of trying to pull back the curtain a little bit for you guys, for the audience. And that'll still be here to a degree, but this is going to shift much more towards me trying to educate myself. Whereas normally in Critical Eyes, maybe it's, you know, closer to like a 50-50 split of like educating myself versus educating others. This is going to be much more like 80-20 on educating myself versus others. So if I take it all in that sort of spirit of analysis and self-education, and we'll get into it.
Third in the Felguard series. You've been doing performance capture for months.
Oh, man.
So hot.
I get sucked into the game. Die in the game, die in real life, dude. Okay. Look, I've run one of these things before. I have done what the fuck's it called? Isekai? I think this is an Isekai game. Isekai. I mean, I know that Isekai has all other sorts of implications. But at its base, it is just a fantasy subgenre featuring stories where ordinary people are transported into magical worlds. So it's an Isekai. I've done this. I've also there's a fantasy book series that I won't name because it's kind of embarrassing. It's like borderline smut. So I will not name it. But there's a fantasy book series that's an isekai that I really like and that I've based a short limited series on. It was, when I say limited series, it was like 10 sessions, maybe 12. So pretty fucking long. Not nearly as short as it probably should have been. But I love this sort of shit. And watch it not even be that. But I love this sort of stuff, especially. I think it's a little bit of like a it's sort of a weird kind of, depending on how it's presented, it can be pretty cringy. But I do think that it's actually a cool conceit to help get new players that aren't used to role playing into like the base concept of role playing, because they can play as them and they are just interacting with they can, how do I say it? We talk all the time about like what does your character know versus what does your player know, metagame knowledge. And one of the great benefits of like the isekai conceit is that it basically removes metagaming being a bad thing. Like there still exists an amount of like metagaming you can do where you as the player versus your in-game character that is also you. There is a distinction there of from your character's point of view, which is, by the way, again, it's you. You are actually in the game. Again, very die in the game, die in real life. And you as a player know that you're not. So there's still an amount of like metagaming risk and all of that sort of stuff. But in terms of metagame knowledge of like, I know what this thing is, I know what that thing is, Isekai basically removes that. It also removes the sort of barrier to why am I with these other adventurers? Why am I with these other people? Oh, because they're my friends. Like, we're friends in real life, so we are going to work together to get out of this. It also normally presents a very clear conceit of what the goal is. The goal is almost always to get back to the real world. I think that's where a lot of isekais can become more cringe, is when that stops becoming the goal and when they just kind of sink into their like magical alternate reality selves. That can be where it kind of jumps the shark for me personally. So I think that as long as the goal of getting back to real life is maintained, that can be really nice. So the entire concept can be really nice for introducing new players because it breaks down the role-playing barriers, not only of how do I pretend to be someone with different knowledge than me, but also the role-playing barriers of why do I trust the people I'm with, and it gives a very, very clear goal for the entire party. So I think it's good for new DMs, new players, and I've never thought about this before, but great for a one-shot. Like, really, really great, hyper clear goal. You don't have to do really any amount of that normal, like, setup and get to know you. There's really very obvious and very fun and very funny roleplay opportunities, depending on, what your characters look like in the actual game world. Thinking, like, Jumanji, which, again, can be on the border of being cringe, and also can get into some not cool spots of like, role playing, like being a guy role playing a woman in like bad faith and like making the fact that you're a woman a joke. But it can also work, like those sorts of things. The much more, I think, clear and maybe less controversial option is like, oh, skinny person becomes big buff person, like Sam or Taliesin plays a Grog type character, and then everyone is having to interact with them as if they are that big tough character. So that can be a real positive bent, again, for new players, new DMs, and for one shots. The only other thing to kind of watch out for, and one of the only other complicating factors is if you're still using traditional D&D stat sheets, character sheets, this can get complicated with the mental characteristics. And in the the limited series that I ran, that was an isekai, I was younger. I did not know how to handle this as a DM, as like an interpersonal relationship thing. But one of my players played a character, but again, it was an isekai, so their character was them, just transported into a different world, that had really low mental stats. Like almost all of their mental stats were below 10. Maybe one of them like was a 10, but I think 2 out of the 3 at least were 8s, and the other one was very low as well. And they put on some really bad stereotypes to try and like represent that. So I do think that there is a risk in this sort of gameplay conceit to and by the way, I mean, I don't want to like put an excuse on like we were young. It was bad at the time. I just didn't know how to handle it as a DM. And if you are a first-time DM, that is a risk that you run with this sort of game, is putting yourself in a situation where they are playing versions of them. So interacting with that does bear an amount of risk. Like, you're breaking down the barrier between a player and their character. Not all the way, but at least a little bit. And so now the ways that those characters are portrayed, the situations that they're put in, could have more of an impact on the player and kind of vice versa. So, you know, I tell you that story because it's a good example of, like, I was not expecting to need to deal with that as, like, a 17-year-old. And it put me in a very, very tough position of having to have, like, a very tough and very awkward conversation with my friend that did not go very well. We're good now, but it's a risk. It's a risk towards these sorts of games. And again, I say all that not even knowing if that's actually what's going on. So it'll be very funny if it's not. But
is this game over yet?
This is flying close. I love it.
You've been at home writing all day on a totally unrelated project.
Oh, why would I do that?
Well, because it's anime, and that goes deep with you. No. Somebody's got to adapt that shit.
God damn it.
But you get to go and work on this fucking AAA game, Felgar 3. You're going to go do some VO. You're heading over now. And Sam...
Oh, son of a bitch. Oh, my goodness. These are all easy. There's the fucking Brennan Lee Mulligan quote about sniping through the duplex door. He's getting all of them. This is how you know that they're... that not only are they good friends, but also all, like, working professionals in this very niche job. This is crazy.
Right. Well, Liam turns to the rest of the guys and says, well, we'll just give it, like, we'll give it a minute, and if it's a problem, we'll figure it out. But if you say that he's good, what's his name?
His name is Bixby.
Bixby.
This feels... I don't know how to say it. It's not uncomfortable, but it's boringly accurate. But in an interesting way. Like, I am enthralled by this little peek into the very mundane back end of showbiz. Or of this branch of showbiz, because I've done live theater. I've done a lot of live theater. I've done, professional dancing, and this is very, like, how show people talk. It's not all like, hey, Buster, get out there, break a leg, you're gonna knock him dead. It's like very mundane, logistical conversations. And I like every industry has their degree of this. Like, I was watching this is very off topic. I was watching an undersea live streaming service that was doing brine pool. Well, I wasn't watching it. It was in a clip of a zoology channel that I watch about brine pools. And the scientists on the live stream of this, like, underwater sea cam sounded so normal. Like, they sounded like just not the stereotype of a scientist that you have in your head. It wasn't like them, like, taking notes. They were all like, oh shit, like, whoa, look at those waves, that's so cool. And then, like, the cam, like, dipped below the water. They're like, whoa, shit. And that's, I don't know, getting those, like, little peeks behind the curtain into the mundanity, the very human mundanity of jobs that you have an image of in your brain. I don't know. It's very cool to me. That's why I say it's, like, interestingly boring. Of, like, oh yeah, like, the back end is boring sometimes. It's, like, very mundane. And that in and of itself, getting to see that is kind of interesting, to me at least.
Some of that,
Whew, this is 9:09 to 20, and we're still... But, okay. This is what I'm talking about with, like, the 80% self-education of, like, I'm really trying to, like, intake the effect that this is having on, the actual game. This is, like, a lot of, like, jokes and bants, If we're actually looking at, like, what is needed for the intro to, like, get us into things, I think it's a funny conceit. I don't exactly know how it's going to transition in. I don't know if they're going to be, like, they are playing voice actors that are playing the characters, but like I don't know what all the levels of separation are going to be. But it's fun. It's fun for like them as voice actors. They're doing this whole kind of little skit. I also think to an extent it's like I think there's a little bit of motivation for them to do this little skit for the audience to like kind of replicate give like a replicated BTS of like being a voice actor. So I think that is good for this specific stream. I think we could probably shorten this though. If we're running this, at home, I think you could shorten it. But we'll see. Maybe you can't. Maybe this is all required. It is funny though.
Turns around.
Can they hear it?
It's just give me 1 minute. We're just trying to figure out shit on our end. Okay.
Should we take a...
He's already gone.
Just do one more letter.
Continue to
That's
talk.
just usually what they want is one more letter.
Pierce is fucking taking forever with his tea, also. I
sent him to Starbucks.
Oh.
Okay. So we're kind of in it. We're kind of still in the skip, but we're kind of in it. And Liam has given, okay. If we're talking about, doing this with new players or players that are uncomfortable with role-playing, terrible, I think. I'm going to be real with you. I think terrible. But for a table of people that are super comfortable with role-playing, are obviously very, in this sector, have all worked together, I think it works for this group of players where he's having them do role play before the game actually starts, and he is giving them something to react to and interact with this whole, this argument in the booth. So there's definitely stuff here. It's weird because you don't really know where it's going. Like it is sort of predicated off of the like boring in between periods. And in a similar way that I was like, oh, that's like boring but interesting earlier when I was talking about, getting a peek into the mundanity of this business. Those moments can also be interesting for roleplay, like those in between boring, mundane moments of just like waiting for the next thing to happen. Those can be really interesting roleplay opportunities, especially if something has just happened, but you can't interact with it, which is what Liam is giving them here, where something happened, they don't really know what it is, but they can like make some guesses, and they can't really interact with it, at least as of right now. And that is an opportunity for those like kind of mundane, boring roleplay moments, but that's like... I don't want to say advanced roleplay because that sounds pretentious, but it's roleplay that really requires a like separation of self that I don't think newer players or players that are more uncomfortable with roleplay in general, I don't think this is the way to introduce them to it. But it's obviously interesting. It's weird. It's kind of off. The entire thing feels kind of off, but in like an interesting way.
The next thing that happens is each of those halves you see from that gooey...
Dude, when we talk about the type of table that Critical Role is, and when we talk about the type of DM that Matt is, and why certain things work and certain things don't, we've talked about it a lot. We've danced around it. I don't think this is ever something that I've hit on so specifically, because it's never stood out to me in such stark contrast as it is right now. But these players, man, they're unabashed investment within stupid as fuck scenes is crazy. It's crazy. This is, I don't mean stupid in like a bad way, but like ridiculous. Like there's like globules of matter, 360 degree. Like I'm with it. I am into this sort of thing. This is one of the things that I like about Blades in the Dark is put it on the counter. it gives you a lot of room to be very poetic in your language about the effects of the magic, about what happens in the game in general. And that's sort of the vibe that Liam is grasping onto here, is that like hyper poetic language. And so many tables, so many players I've played with, so many tables I've been at would lose interest here. Like they would it is so ridiculous that it would like shunt them out of believability. You know what I'm saying? But that is not even like a moment of a question for these four. Where like watch fucking Laura and Travis especially.
And the two halves just sort of hover, and the both halves of Liam's face look horrified and frozen.
No! Just like the childlike joy and wonder and awe at like a fun story. It's really cool. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm saying things that are going to be taken as like insults or critiques, but it's awesome. Like, I wish that, and this is not to critique my own players, this is to critique, I don't know, society, but this kind of like, again, like childlike joy and wonder at a fun story, a ridiculous story. I feel like I have not been able to capture that sort of thing at my tables. This joy and this wonder. It's my players. I don't know if they're cynical. I don't know if we're cynical. But it's definitely like they are
in space, and then
they are so locked in on this story. And I've talked about before, you know, I grew up playing strategy games. I wouldn't consider my table war gamers at all. They definitely not power gamers, but they also like to be hyper specifically challenged. And to them, like, not power gaming is part of the challenge. And so, because I'm not power gaming, I have to be even more clever and more specific. Like, that's very much my friends, and I think a lot of times my mindset is I'm going to play this very specific character, and if I'm clever enough, it won't even matter that I didn't power game or whatever. And I think that, like, I've definitely had these sorts of, like, really great moments, but it's so easy with them. Just to a point that is almost unbelievable. Like, it's not. I use that word carefully because I do believe it. But it is intense how into these like make-believe little like skits and environments they can get. And if you as a player and me as a player, I'm talking to myself as well. If I want to try and like capture a little bit of this in my next game. I want to try and capture that just that unabashed, no self-consciousness interest in the silly little stories that we're all telling each other. Because not everything is going to be high cinema, high drama, high art. And I think if we can practice getting as into a silly little scene like this as they are, it helps even more when the serious scenes come about. When the Suntree scene comes about. When we're combating Strahd and, you know, maybe our gut instinct is to sort of break the tension and make a Dracula joke. I think practicing this sort of investment in the silly stuff is easier than practicing it on the hard stuff, but will still prepare you and help you build those skills of investment. Because, like, this does not... Maybe it does happen naturally for some people. It totally could. But I don't think I've ever seen it before. I can't think of this sort of, enrapturement at watching the DM. I've watched very few actual plays. But I watched a little bit of Adventure Zone, or listened to, I guess. Never heard anything like this. Watched like the first half of Fantasy High. Fantasy High is great. The players are not capturing this. This is so different. And this is the sort of attitude that helps silly characters like Victor shine, as well as incredibly serious characters and incredibly serious moments like Thordak or the Rakshasa. Like, it would be so easy to take the piss with Umbrasyl, but they have like practiced this like radical investment. And so they're able to like take it seriously. Which I can't even imagine as a DM. Like, I'm actually a little intimidated at the thought of my characters, of my players, like, hanging on every word like this. It's ludicrous in the best way. It's insane. I don't even know if I want to be this radical about it, but I am watching it and how much fun they're having, like how much joy they're deriving from this, and it's like, man, that is a little intimidating. That is a little scary to think about investing so hard in this sort of thing. But that's also like kind of cool and beautiful.
The next thing that happened. Let's go out.
iPhones and start making.
What is happening?
I'm periscoping all this shit. Good
Do we have any signal?
You have no signal.
You know, I just saw I think it was a Jenny D video. Oh, I also just realized I'm on the wrong browser. Wait. I need to be on this browser. I just saw, like I said, I think a Jenny D video about yes and is not maybe actually like good roleplay advice. Let me make sure before I put this onto someone it doesn't belong on. Yes and D&D. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, like a month ago. I have not watched the video, so I cannot say. D&D is not improv. I agree with her. Like I said, I haven't watched the video. I'm going purely, I'm being the commenter right now that sees the title and thumbnail and hops in and comments on the video before watching it at all. Me and Mike, we're just talking about this sort of person, and I'm being them right now, where I am kind of assuming her point, and I'm sure it's a good one. I like Jenny D. But this is sort of, I think when people talk about yes and, or like when that sort of improv feel is good in D&D, I think a lot of times they are talking about this sort of sequence where, and they're not always talking about players. Sometimes they're talking about DMs. But it's like the two that dropped to the ground turned towards Pierce. Sam, he was back with the Starbucks. And then Liam immediately goes, yeah, he's back with a full tray of coffee. And then Travis goes, use the coffee. And I think that's what people are trying to get at when they say D&D is improv or, use yes and or whatever, is keep the momentum in the scene. Don't, stop the scene in its tracks, which is, that's supposed to be the point of yes and in improv. It doesn't actually mean always say yes and. There are very famous improv troupes where you will frequently see them say no. But it is the core of the advice is to keep the scene moving. And I think that that's very easy for them because they're so invested in the scene that they are reacting as if they are in the scene. So it's incredibly easy for them to like keep the scene moving forward, not just, sit there and not know what to do, which I think is the main point of yes and. Maybe I'll have to... Oh, you know what? Fuck. This is pre-recorded. I can actually just watch this and then tell you what I think of it and not have to worry about like rebroadcasting because it's not live. Fuck. Okay, wait. I'm just going to watch this. I'm curious because I feel like this will actually apply to the scene that we're seeing right now. So I guess I'll see you in a moment. What up? Editing Mega here. How's it going? Turns out I had a ton to say about that video. So I will actually be kind of segmenting it off into its own little thing. It was generally just applicable to this in that basically what I predicted beforehand, that Yes and is about keeping momentum, and I think that Liam definitely did that here. If you want to see the much more complicated reaction, look forward to that in its own video. But I'll let you get back to past guy me. Goodbye. But back to Critical Role, back to Liam's quest, and I think that he is very clearly implementing Yes and very, very well. They also, I was saying that like the Isekai, which it does seem like this is going to be, the Isekai conceit provides a really easy like goal to the quest of get out. But rather than forcing them into the game, Liam is tempting them into the game, or into, the fantasy world, with an additional sort of quest objective of save Pierce. And maybe maybe Pierce will just be fucking dead, and the portal will close behind them, and we're trapped now. But he is... And this is an interesting thing about one-shots, is generally in one-shots, players are going to take the hooks that you give them. So I think that there is an interesting stylistic difference between giving players a super obvious hook of you can either, your two options, are stay in this room and let your friend be, I don't know, devoured by the monster Liams, and, not go in and try to save him, not be the heroes, and just sit here and wait until someone comes to help. Or you can go in and play the game. So, like, it's a super obvious hook, or you could just have them get sucked in. And I do think it's, like, kind of a purely stylistic difference of whether or not Liam had just sucked them in to the alternate world versus giving them a reason to choose to go in. I don't think it actually matters, frankly. But I do think that it's, maybe a slight stylistic difference that might feel a little different to your players. One will also take longer. So I think, like, ultimately, and this is why I say it's a stylistic difference, is because one kind of emphasizes and maintains player autonomy, whereas one is faster. And I mean, can't say anything else about this. You can say a lot of good things about this opening. The one thing you cannot say is that it's fast, because it's not. Okay. Wait. I maybe take it back about the stylistic stuff. I mean, it's still okay. It still is stylistic. You could have had it's. Liam's doing kind of a weird construction. He's doing this like weird that I don't hate, but he's doing this like weird intro where they're not actually like they're not statted D&D characters yet, but he's still having them like role play and like interact with environments. Because like he said, there's light coming from Liam's Mac, very clearly a clue. Which is interesting. It's really only possible within this Isekai conceit. You can't really do it otherwise. But it's interesting. It has some benefits. It gets them into the role-playing mood. But it's also weird because it's sort of a different type of role-playing. A bit. Like, this is going to very rapidly switch genres, and switch conceits, and I think it might be a little bit too much for a one-shot to, like, try and cram all this in. It'd be super interesting for a session 1, I think, where we're gonna have, like, a ton of time after this, but we have this, like, kind of intro roleplay as, like, our, real-world personas. That is kinda really interesting. You could even extend that to roleplay the characters before they become statted, like before they achieve level 1. that could also, I mean, that could work for like a standard D&D game. But especially for a one-shot, it takes up a decent amount of time, and I think its main benefit is kind of ease of access of you don't have to worry about your sheet, you don't have to worry about your abilities or your class or whatever. You just, fantasize for a little bit, you just role play for a little bit. You just play make-believe for a while. And that's way easier, but then you're going to have this very this sort of paradigm shift when you actually get into being a statted D&D character. That's a very different type of roleplay. So I think that those two things could coexist, but I don't know about them for a one-shot. It's taken up a lot of time to actually get into the meat of the shot. But it does help with prep time to an extent. It helps with prepping. It's like to an extent, wasting time does give you more bang for your buck. To an extent.
My character name is Sam.
Mine's
So Liam made the characters for them. That's fine. Especially for an Isekai conceit. That actually, I would say that's borderline very good for this sort of thing. Interesting.
Right.
Bixby, get over here.
Oh gosh, Bixby.
This is weird. It's weird in a way I can't quite put my finger on, because it's like they're in like an almost escape room. It's like everything that I thought was going to continue to happen is not. But okay, so they're statted as themselves. So they now do have stats. So now we're in to D&D. And we're in like an escape room, but the environment hasn't really been laid out. And I think that this is maybe something I'm taking away from it, is especially for the first scene, before you set your players loose. Like I think you get through the intro. You get to a point. You basically go through essentially on rails, which is basically what we were in before now-ish. So you go through essentially on rails, and then you get to the point where you're going to set them loose. But whatever that first challenge is, should either be like a relatively like quote unquote on rails type of challenge, or it should be like it should be a more open-ended challenge like this, but where the environment is incredibly thoroughly characterized and like described. Because even though they have a clear depth of knowledge about what the inside of a VO booth is like, there is still an amount of confusion as to what they should do, and an amount of just like trying random bullshit that doesn't seem to be the direction that they're supposed to be going in. So it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, it's cracked open.
Yeah, we want to try to be as quiet as possible going past.
Follow.
You know what to do. Make a stealth check on the
Oh
far.
jeez.
Can I roll for Bixby?
Yes.
Oh, this is
Get a
good.
plus 2.
What? 20.
That is interesting. It feels that's more like, ooh, funny little thing of like Liam's obviously the one that nowadays I get on the most about making checks before the DM asks, and Liam's response there seemed to indicate to me like, okay, well, if you're trying to stealth, just stealth. Why are you waiting for me to respond? Which I don't think is a good DMing strategy, but it is in line with with what I have seen of Liam.
Really drawn a map?
I'm serious.
Hell yeah, I love that.
Okay.
I mean, if ADR5 is on that map, put it out earlier. Put it out earlier. Put down some Fog of War if you need to. Put it out earlier. But ADR5 might not be on that map.
So here's ADR 5. You just smash the glass right here.
Okay.
And you come up the stairs, and as you creep up quiet as you can, out
Okay, so that map, obviously, I was giving like big thumbs up. It didn't look like an interesting map in terms of like a D&D sense. But this is a real world location that they are all very familiar with. He did not even say that that was the kitchen. They just knew it was the kitchen because they all know this location. And so I think that the initial, like, say you're a teenager, you're running a one shot that's set in your high school, or in like a spot that all of the friends know. But you've been watching my videos and you're like, oh, I got to make the map interesting. I do think there is something to be said for knowledge of the environment potentially trumping interest. Like, one of the reasons that I do my kind of tracing reality technique, where I take like real world locations and I like modify them and I mess with the lines a little bit, but broadly the topography is the same or similar, is to give it a grounded feel so that they have some intuitive information about how to navigate the environment. And there is an amount of restriction on how interesting a map can be when you do it that way. If you're trying to base it on real world lines, that implies an amount of restriction on how things are organized. And this is sort of the other end of that scale of massive restriction because you're basing it on a real world location that everyone already knows. But I think that lowers its required like inherent interest because you have raised the knowledge of navigating that environment so substantially. So with this, I still think it's good that he drew a map so that they can like track their progress and like know where things are happening. I think that's very, very good. But I don't think it needs to be that interesting. You can go towards making the adversaries interesting or, special effects that aren't normally there. But the actual lines of the map don't need to be as interesting because of this inherent knowledge that they all have. The only partial problem that I'm having with this is that this seems to almost be a reverse Isekai, where the fantasy world is invading the normal world, not they are invading the fantasy world. And the only problem with that I have is that the objective is unclear. Like, I talked about one of the really, like, primary benefits of that conceit is that the objective is hyper clear. You're working towards it the entire time. Whereas in this, maybe the Liams are the source, but it also might have just been this, like, weird, random natural disaster. It's very unclear of what the actual like source of all of this is, where they like what they need to do. Even if they had an optional objective, which may be the optional objective, but no, the guy got sucked into the portal. So that's not even like if they had seen like a guy get drug out into the hallway and they're maybe like following a blood trail or something like that. That would provide them with this kind of interim objective while they figure things out and discover the ultimate objective. But right now, like if we're being real, if they walk out into this hallway and they see this gold and they see this giant claw, they're probably just going back into ADR 5 or somewhere else and trying to barricade the door and wait. Right? And that level of like reality thinking is even harder to set to the side in a conceit like this where you're kind of like playing yourself. So it's even harder to separate that like level of like reality thinking. So I think to kind of put it more concisely, I think so far this has a bit of a problem with objectives and pushers and motivations. But other than that, it's going and it's a little slow. It's a little slow, but other than that, it's fun.
armful of sharp
Okay, good new DMing technique. Just like he said, just like make a dexterity check. Earlier he said make an athletics check. Or sorry, he didn't say athletics. He said make a strength check. Using just the core abilities and not specific skill proficiencies, and just making the checks and making the DCs like 5 lower than you think they should be, is a good intro to DMing or like intro. Is a good beginner DM technique because it really simplifies things for you. It's way easier to ask for one of the 6 abilities than it is to pick out a specific skill. We talk all the time about skill proficiencies on Critical Eyes of like, oh, I think that should have been that, or maybe this could have been that, blah, 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 blah. It's normally a little bit more clear with the 6 abilities, and that can be nice for a beginner DM. Does it reward, skill monkey type classes? No, obviously not. It doesn't reward expertise. But in terms of like keeping the pace up and just like crafting a fun and functional game as a new DM and as a first-time DM when you're not sure what to do, I think that falling back on an ability score and an ability check rather than a skill check is like a good mental fallback when you're not sure what else to do. Obviously, still use skills when you can and when they're appropriate, but just using raw abilities can absolutely work, and it can take a lot of mental strain off you.
I will sell you and be rich in the post-apocalyptic world.
All right, so you sprint past.
Love it. I love a DC 5. I love a DC 5. DC 5s can be hilarious, especially if they fucking fail. I feel like, it's a lot of times you see, the really high DCs all the time. You really rarely see anything below like a DC 10. But I love a good DC 5. I love the idea that you might just roll terribly. But if you have a high enough modifier, it's probably not going to matter. I like a DC 5. Hell, I like a DC fucking 2 more than critical failures on skill checks. I like just modifying the DC way fucking down. So that you still feel your like character getting better. Because if we're talking about like Lore's normal character Vex, I don't think Vex can fail a DC 5 dex check unless, they're implementing skill check failures or critical failures. I think literally if she rolled a 1, she would still pass a DC 5. And I like that. I like having these super low DCs that some people literally can't fail. I really like that aspect of things. But a character could theoretically fail them. So I've talked about this before of like, oh, you have them roll or you put in like a passive DC that, someone will pass. And I've had people say like, okay, well, if you know they're going to pass it, why even have them roll? Why put that passive check in? Et cetera, et cetera. And I've struggled to articulate it before, but I think I've just kind of realized what the thing is. I like to put in those checks, the DC 5s or the passives or whatever, if someone can fail them. So there's like the very classic, like, if there's no chance of failure, don't have them roll, and if there's no chance of success, don't have them roll. I think I've finally figured out where I think the missing link in that discussion is, because I've heard, people respond like, okay, then I have to like know all of my character's stats and I have to be tracking them and I have to like consider, can they fail ahead of time? And I've always struggled to articulate my exact opinion on that, but I think this is kind of it. It's not necessarily when I say, don't have them roll if they can't fail. The they in that is like the party. It is do not have anyone in the party roll if none of them can fail. But if you're in a situation where Travis is trying something and Travis's character will definitely succeed, but someone with a lower stat range, like a lower stat value, like a lower strength, lower athletics, whatever, might not succeed. Like we're in that type of territory where like the check is like a CR 5 or something, where someone with like a negative strength has a chance of failing it, but Travis doesn't. You still have Travis roll for that. The evaluation is not necessarily on the specific character. It is an evaluation of like the party as a whole. Could anyone in the party fail the check? If yes, then it should be rolled, no matter if, the person rolling it has no chance of failing it. I think that's the evaluation in my brain. And that is sort of separate from a very related but recent thing we've been discussing about like character knowledge of like, oh, I might only let certain the character's role for this sort of check, that purely comes into like world knowledge, not capabilities. I'm not basing that ever on like their history score or their arcana score or their nature score. I'm not basing it on the score. I am basing it on, does that character have a background to even attempt this role? That is like it's a purely it's not like a stat decision. It's like an ephemeral decision. I'm trying to think of anything else related to it while I'm on this kick, you know? And this applies to the passive checks as well. Like I've talked about how, you still put the passive in, even if Laura, who has a crazy passive perception, is pretty much going to nail all of the passive perception checks you put in front of her. The party might split. So you still put a passive perception check if someone in the party might not pass it, because you never know who's going to encounter it. You never know who's going to try it. So while it might be the person that auto-succeeds, great, good for them, it also might be someone that doesn't auto-succeed it. Like I think Travis and Sam might have been in this scenario. Obviously, one of them got like a 5, but they didn't get a nat 1. They, because they didn't say nat 1. And we know that they work with critical failures. So I think that is my thought process, is could anyone in the party fail it? Could anyone in the party succeed it? If yes, anyone in the party that attempts it should roll. That's where I land on it. All right, just in case like the lighting took a big change or something, I just went and took the dog on a quick walk. So I had to like reset the lights and shit. So I don't know if the lighting changed, but if it did, that's why. But that's like, I don't know, maybe one of the benefits of doing this sort of thing is that I can do it at a bit more of a relaxed pace. Then we can just jump straight back into it.
This was the light. It's gone. Now you're just iPhones. As you run past this.
Okay, that's a decent, I was saying like they don't have a motivation, they don't have a objective, but there is an alternate strategy. You don't always need an actual objective. Sometimes you can just be running from something. The objective is to get away. Now, the dragon was tough because they had to run past the dragon to get away from the dragon, which is a little bit of friction. But this like crunching of the tunnel, slowly pieing towards them is number one, a timer. Fucking Liam already putting one in where Matt could never. And it's a good like motivating force to push them forward. If you don't want to like reveal an objective for them to run toward, you can reveal a threat for them to run away from. So this is a very minor nitpick. I've talked before about how I don't like unsavable effects. And in this case, they couldn't move no matter what. But really, there's also an easy way to describe the same events in a way that I do like, which is just that it happens too fast for you to react. Yeah, because if I hear you can't move, my instinct is there needs to be a save for that. But if it happens too fast, that might not be, a savable scenario. And the same thing could have happened either way. So it's a small nitpick, but it's like a general tonal thing where I don't even think it's like a stylistic decision. I think it's just generally good of if you're going to impose that type of effect on your players, there should be a save. But things could always happen too quickly for them to react. Now, you could have a player that says, could I roll like an initiative roll or something that would maybe allow me to react quicker? Or, roll a dex check, roll a sleight of hand, or not sleight of hand, but, something in that vein. But I think that is much more in the realm of you're not saving, or you're not imposing an effect on them. You are just saying they're not quick enough. This is happening so fast that there's not a reaction possible. Even if it seems slow. There's a really fun scene from Into the Black, which is a sci-fi book series. and it talks about like their sci-fi version of FTL, of Faster Than Light, involves this like kind of cosmically horrifying mode of travel where the FTL happens instantly, but from the subjective perspective of each individual crew member, it looks like the ship is disintegrating in front of them because of time dilation, whatever. And so they watch as like they are exposed to the vacuum of space, and they like are standing on the edge of their ship looking over the maw of deep space before they teleport. And none of that actually happens in the reality. It's all instantaneous. The ship moves at exactly the same, every ship in the every particle in the ship moves at the same time. But because of their subjective experience, they see this. And I think that sort of description can be a way to capture a very similar effect of this is all happening at once, but you see, much like your life flashing before your eyes, you see this, it's all happening at once, but your mind almost speeds up and you're able to take it in even though you're too slow to react. Something in there's maybe a middle ground if you want to give it the feel of being trickled out without it actually being trickled out in a way that they could react to.
Yeah. How many arrows do you have?
How many arrows?
This is weird. This is a fun opening to again, all of this is giving me very like opening to a campaign. Like session 1, session 0.5 sort of vibes of like taking us and really like setting us down in the world, and like a lot of shit happens. Our players or our characters in the story don't have a ton of agency. They're just kind of watching things and exploring the environment and learning about the strange new world that they find themselves in, which is I think really good for the start of a campaign where they are going to slowly gain agency and slowly gain control over their surroundings and the systems that they now find themselves in. But it's a lot of narration for a one-shot. Like, it's cool. It's a fun idea. It's fun narration. I have a lot of questions that I am legitimately intrigued to know the answer to, but I will not be able to gain the answer to throughout the course of a one-shot. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's some of the point. I'm fine with there being unanswerable questions throughout the course of a one-shot. That's fine. But a lot of this so far has been seeming to be all like introduction to the shot, and not a lot of our characters actually like playing. So we'll see.
Inside the building video.
Actually, I do take back something I said. Well, not really. But Matt has provided them with an objective, which is good. He's not provided them with an objective to actually like solve whatever situation they're in, which again, little bit odd, feels like the opening to a campaign. But he has provided them with an objective of Ashley in the cafeteria, and they know the environment well enough that he can just describe modifications to the environment, and they will be able to like properly navigate it. So I think that is very cool and very good. Good objective, good mission. Get to the cafeteria, figure out what's up with Ashley. And maybe Ashley will be able to transport them back or something. Who knows? Still a lot of time of them not playing is my main thing right now.
I'm really scared for that giant thing.
Okay, really small thing there. You're in a new time or dimension. You're making a new stealth check. He's not saying it explicitly, but that is, I think, a good mindset for stealth. Of the stealth roll applies until something substantial about the situation changes. So I don't think you need to make a new stealth check every 30 feet, every fucking whatever. I don't think stealth checks should be based on time passing or distance passing. They should be based on the situation substantially changing. So he says, you're in a new time, make a new check. That's absolutely how I feel about stealth. And you can't remake stealth checks. You made your stealth check, you live with it, and you operate within that until the situation substantially changes. This is an interesting sort of issue with them getting these pre-con characters of Sam doesn't know how Beastmaster works. And if you're going to do pre-con characters, you should put everything necessary on the sheet. So, like, over-include information that you maybe think is unnecessary, so that it's all... So, over-include information that you think is, like, maybe unnecessary, but is still potentially valuable for the person on that sheet, because, like, in this case, Sam has no idea how Ranger operates with a beast to command. Bixby the dog. So he's a little bit not only out of his comfort zone, but he's going to slow down any combats. It is why for most one-shots, I do still have people make custom characters. I normally don't have them do precons for this reason of precons can run the issue of slowing things down. But honestly, if you do precons, but you give them to them a little bit ahead of time so they can like ask questions, do a little bit of research, I think that could work. It's just sort of the surprise precon. Also, maybe he did give them to them ahead of time and they possibly just didn't. Sam possibly just didn't read them. Or they were too busy. Who knows? But
You guys all see it come out of his hand.
yeah, honestly, Liam's doing a really good job at running this. Most of the awkwardness is coming from the precon characters, which is very interesting. I honestly did not think that it would give them this much trouble. And it might be also because they're doing the reverse Isekai thing, where they are not like in a situation where like Rangers and Warlocks are like a thing. They're like a new thing. So like, Taliesin doesn't fully trust his powers, and Sam is acting as if his bow and arrow skills are like from camp. Because they're not like inhabiting these strange new bodies in this strange new world. So yeah, I think it's not I don't really think it's like an issue with Liam's DMing. I don't think it's an issue with either the precons or the reverse isekai. It is like them together that is causing some like issues and friction. Because otherwise, I think this combat would be going relatively smoothly, even with them not seeming very prepared for it. And by them, I mean the players, not Liam. So this is something that I have thought about before. People talk often about like the whole subclass at level 3 thing, and I also praised Daggerheart for giving you subclass at level 1. I thought that was a very good choice. However, I also think that subclass at level 3 is not as big a deal as people make it out to be. It just means that you start gaining the mechanics of that subclass at level 3. Like, yes, theoretically you could choose a different one, but it's like people that are bothered by it. It's like right now, Sam is acting as if he's a Beastmaster, even though he's level 1. And Ranger does not get actual Beastmaster mechanics until level 3. So I think to an extent it makes sense for him to like have a beast, but to not be able to do any of the Beastmaster things. I think that's a totally fine way to represent that. And then as you go up level 2, and then once you reach level 3, you unlock the ability to better command your beast, etc., etc. Like, let's say, like I think Warlock Pact Boon is a great example. Like, you get your patron at level 1, but we all know that the real choice within a Warlock is the Pact Boon. And I think it would like make a lot of flavor sense. And I think if they'd given you Pact Boon at level 1 and then they moved it to level 3, I think people would be mad. They'd be like, well, how am I supposed to play fucking Warlock? How am I supposed to play a Blade Lock at levels 1 and 2 if I don't have access to my Blade yet? How am I supposed to play a Chain Lock if I don't have access to my Familiar until level 3? People might already say that. I don't know. But I don't think it matters. The Pact Boon is a representation of your patron placing more trust into you. You still have your patron. It still is like giving you shit. So you just don't get like the discrete benefits, the specific benefits of the warlock, that of the packed boon until your patron feels as though they can trust you with it. I mean, fuck it. We could even go even further with this. You don't even need a patron at level 1. I'll fucking say it. You don't even need a patron at level 1. I think it'd be weird if you didn't. Honestly, I'll be honest. But you don't need it. Like, you don't need patron-specific mechanics at level 1. You can choose, like, oh, Mazora is my patron, but I still don't get fiend abilities, like fiend subclass abilities until level 3. That'd be fine. That'd honestly be fine. Cleric, same thing. You could just get generic cleric abilities. Hell, even if flavor-wise, you do not choose a patron at level 1, we're not even like doing the whole separation of flavor and mechanics. You don't have a warlock patron. I think that levels 1 and 2 could still represent like you learning basic eldritch knowledge that is common amongst warlocks of any patron. And maybe you are just learning some oogity boogity rituals or whatever. And then at level 3, you actually, connect with a very specific patron to take your training and your power further. We could say, if you don't get a patron until level 3, that there can be warlocks of level 2, but they can never get to level 3 unless they pact with a patron. We could easily say that. So, all of that is to say, I truly don't think that the level at which you get a subclass or whatever actually matters. I really don't, for like the flavor of your character. You can always portray it as you are training, you are trying to work up to those abilities and those mechanics, even if you're like something where it's like a very natural talent, like a psionic thing. Like if you're the psionics fighter, let's say. Yeah, it would be a little like strange if you just randomly manifested psionic abilities at level 3, but you don't have to. You can be manifesting psionics, little tiny flavor stuff, less impactful than prestidigitation cantrip. Like in the movies when they're developing their telekinesis and they like make the spoon wobble or they like knock over the domino or something teeny tiny. You could have that at levels 1 and 2, and then at level 3 you kind of make your breakthrough into making the psionics actually useful and like actually have like very distinct and discrete effects. So this is always kind of bugged me, and I think that Sam is a good example of how you can run that sort of flavor. Bixby is useless. Bixby is more of a liability than anything else. So you're not getting the benefits of being a Beastmaster because you haven't reached the subclass yet. But maybe once you do reach the subclass, Bixby actually becomes useful. That won't happen over the course of this one shot, but it's a really good example. So I have no qualms with like subclass level 3 stuff. I know a lot of people do. Personally, my big issue and my big qualm is them being at different levels. Like clerics getting it at level 1, paladins getting it at level 3. There's something that gets it at level 2. It's all over the place. Subclasses should be gained at the same level for every class. It makes multi-classing so much simpler, so much easier to balance, frankly. To me, that is the way they need to go. That's why I liked Daggerhearts of saying, hey, everyone gets it at level 1. If they'd chosen level 2, fine. Level 3, fine. I think for Daggerheart, it makes even more sense to put it at level 1 because they have relatively fewer levels. I think they only have 9, if I remember correctly. Whereas, D&D has 20. So I'd rather see D&D put it all at level 1, all at level 2, all at level 3. I don't think I would go higher than 3. I wouldn't put it into like the 4 or 5s. That's way too high. You would have people like guaranteed starting at level 5. But I think level 2 makes perfect sense for it. You're doing your level 1 is your generic, this is the baseline of the class. Level 2, you get to branch into the subclasses. I think that makes perfect sense. I have always kind of thought that level 3 for subclass is a little bit awkward because level 2 is just an awkward level. Like level 1, yeah, you're basic, you're scrub tier. You can barely do jack shit. But then level 2 is you're not custom yet, for a lot of classes at least. For the majority of classes, you haven't chosen your subclass yet. But you're not level 1, so you're like in this weird middle ground. I think it would make way more sense. For level 1 is the generic one. It makes it to where people actually kind of have to commit to a multi-classing dip. Like they can't just take one level and grab a subclass. They have to like go 2 levels into it to grab a subclass. And then put like level 3 as like the ASI. Because right now it's like 1 is intro, 3 is subclass, 4 is feat, and then 5 is big level up. It's level 3 spells, it's multi-attack, it's uncanny dodge for rogue. 5 is like the big level up moment. And then, 4 is the customization through feats, and 3 is the customization through spell slots. I think move those like down 1 level. 1 is intro, 2 is subclass, 3 is feat, and like 4 is big level up moment. And then from there on, it's a little bit more generic. Or even if 5, honestly, I think if 4 is the awkward, like, empty level that level 2 is now, that's fine. I think having it be after your subclass and after your feat, like your first feat that you choose or your first ASI, I think is way better because you've gotten to actually get into the process of customizing your class. I think it's why people always start at level 3 is because now you're getting to the point where you can start customizing your class. I'm still a big proponent of starting at level 1 because I think that starting at that scrub tier is important, but I think that people really dislike level 2. I think level 2 is the worst part about D&D progression. From then on, people have different, classes have different, scaling, they have different pacing for their powers, but level 2, I think, kind of sucks. I'd be a proponent right now, if you asked me, of start at level 1 and just skip level 2. Or give like double XP for levels 1 and 2. Make them go through those levels at the pace of going through 1 level normally. Because I think level 2 is just kind of a waste right now. And then if all the subclasses were at level 3, that'd be fine. But I think that you want like 1 scrub tier level, then subclass, then everything else. Or put all the subclasses at 1 and do multi-classing like Daggerheart does, where you don't just like get everything out of the class. You get like 1 specific thing. You get access to their one of their domain decks, that sort of thing. Like I think Daggerheart can get away with putting it all at level 1 because their multi-classing works differently. But I think that putting everything at level 1 for D&D wouldn't go well because of how D&D's multi-classing works. So I would want it off of level 1, but at the same level for everyone. So I think if I had to nail it down, everyone gets subclass at level 2. I think I'm good with that.
I
wonder if they made any modifications to that in 2024. I just realized that I gave a big spiel that might be applicable to 2024, to 5.24. I don't know. Because I have seen, like... I think this topic is kind of on my mind because I've seen, like, titles and thumbnails about subclass level. And if I've seen anything related to 5.24, I've tried to glaze my eyes over. I've tried to wipe it out of my mind until I can see it. But I'm now thinking about it where 5.24 might have done something with it. So we'll see. Maybe they put it on level 2. That'd be cool. Maybe they did exactly the thing that I want. I really doubt it. They probably said, if no one gets subclass until level 10.
To try to
Take down.
Okay. There's a little bit I've seen. Liam's done it a couple of times where it's like, is he drowning? Liam says, I don't know. Laura's like, I want to climb something. What do you want to climb? Something sturdy. I don't know what's sturdy from Liam. And there is I think that this is a sort of a new DM trap a little bit, where you want to have the players play around. You want them to try things. You want them to do things. You don't want to give them the answers. You want them to find the answers all on their own. But you also have to bridge the gap between what the player knows and what the character knows. So, like, when she says, I'll climb something that looks sturdy, the answer is not, I don't know what's sturdy, even though you might not. The answer is, okay, roll perception, and then based on the roll, you create something that's sturdy. You know, if she rolls well, or maybe insight, maybe not perception, whatever. You create something out of thin air. You're like, oh, that building over there, by your estimations, looks to be relatively sturdy, looks climbable, looks like it won't break apart under your weight. Now, obviously, a character's perception can always be flawed. There can always be things there that they didn't anticipate. She's only looking at sturdiness. She's not looking at any other factors. But you have to give them opportunities to learn about the world. Like, when he says, I don't know what's sturdy, there's no way that Laura Bailey right now, real Laura Bailey, not in-game Laura Bailey, there's no way that Laura Bailey can determine what is sturdy. So she's saying, I want to climb something sturdy, and Liam says, I don't know what's sturdy, that there's nothing she can do then, because she, as a player, cannot determine what is sturdy unless, you know, Liam provides that. And I think that the real thing is, she has not said the explicit words, I want to try to determine what is sturdy. She is not asked to, like, roll a specific check. And I think that's kind of what Liam is waiting for. And that's a very, like, new DM trap, because I get it. I very much get it. But you have to be, in the same way that I admonish players for asking if they can make a specific check. The corollary of that is I admonish DMs if they do not offer up checks in situations where they just make sense. You know, even though, yeah, maybe she didn't, like, make an active statement, or maybe she didn't, say specifically, I want to try to make this check. She said she wanted to do something that would require a check, not just a climbing check, but this perception check ahead of time. And if you're still not sure, especially as a new DM, of like, hey, should I roll here? It may be better to ask, like, instead of saying, I don't know what's sturdy, she's like, I want to try to climb something sturdy. It's like, okay, you don't know what's sturdy. Do you want to try and find something that's sturdy? And then they say yes, and then you roll the check. It's a very guiding experience, but I know that can be, number one, intimidating as a new DM to guide them, because you don't want to go on rails, you don't want to be railroading, you don't want to, again, give them the answer. But you also have to remember that at base, you are their guide through the world. You want to try and not push them in any specific direction. Remove as much of your bias from the guiding as you can. But you want to look at, like, what they want to do and guide them towards potential solutions.
Okay, it's really tough. I mean,
Thomas, push my butt so I can get up
Why
higher.
don't I climb up?
Because it's gonna break. You're too big.
I can also hear, this isn't a critique. This isn't an admonishment. I feel the feeling still in my chest. It's a feeling that I feel like you never forget of, like, especially if you're a good DM, a lot of times you want your players to succeed. You want your players to do well. And that first time that they definitely fail, but it's not only is it a question of you want them to succeed, but it's also a question of, I don't know how to make this failure interesting. I mean, it's something that I still talk about in Critical Eyes, of how to make a failure interesting. And sometimes sometimes there isn't a way. And I can hear it in Liam's hesitation here, right here.
On a mission right now. Oh no. What is it? Athletics?
Yeah.
Oh no, it's a 7.
okay, it's really tough. I mean,
Thomas, push my.
It's really tough. I mean, Eddie's, you can hear the gears spinning on how can I make this interesting? I don't know what to do. Oh, just saying it fails is not fun. It's tough. It is a skill you have to learn on how to make failure interesting or how to keep the momentum up even if the failure isn't interesting. Because sometimes they need to fail, or not they need to fail, but sometimes they do fail. And you should not bend the rules at all. Shouldn't fudge anything. And there is no way to make their failure interesting. Sometimes that is just the case. But even when that's the case, trying your hardest to keep the momentum and the energy up beyond that failure, that's a DMing skill that there is no way to prepare for. There's no way to like watch a YouTube video and they will, explain the exact steps of how to do that. There's no way. You just have to DM, you have to get experience, and you will slowly build that muscle over time. But it's tough, and I feel for him in this moment because I remember that feeling. And luckily the players are keeping the momentum up for him, so he didn't have to do much, which is good. Like identifying when the players are going to keep the momentum up and you don't need to fucking touch it is an important part of building this skill. So I think that he did well there, and the players did well to keep it up. But it's a tough situation sometimes. An overabundance on checks is also, or an over-reliance on checks, also definitely a new DM thing. I know I just defended the DC5 earlier, but you also have to be, and this is like a design and prep. It's a design issue, it's a prep issue, and it's a in-the-moment running issue of too many checks will slow things down too much. Too few checks will lead to a bit too much of a deterministic feel. Like failure and variability is the lifeblood of D&D. Like you need to roll the math rocks when exploring, because if you just get to do the ideal route every time, not interesting. So you need to have checks that push you into maybe non-ideal situations. That's fun. That's drama. But too many, and it starts to put every check is going to be a layer of friction between you and the world. So you need just enough to where it encourages the variability and the drama, but not too much to where that friction becomes overwhelming, which I think is sort of the territory that we're in right now. But there's a range. It's not, and like I think, for example, I talk all the time about how like I'm a low roll DM. Matt's kind of a high roll DM. I think that in that acceptable range, Matt's like up here and I'm like down here. The range is wide, but you just have to be careful about a super overabundance. I've talked about how I don't like Matt's style because I think that it makes everything too variable, but like too variable, too dramatic, everything, all the time. But I've never talked about it, or maybe I have, I don't know. But I've rarely talked about it, at least, actually providing like friction to the pacing. But this is an example where having it on everything does provide some friction to the pacing. And it also might be like a new DM jitters thing of wanting to kind of, wanting to vamp, wanting to give himself time to think. I could very much see that. And, you need a vamping tool that works for you. I think that this one is probably more disruptive than, like, what I think Matt's vamping tool is, which is, like, using, like, flowery language, over-describing things, really kind of rambling on descriptions to give himself time to think. I think that's his vamping tool, and I think that's a better vamping tool than overusing checks. I've been saying they should be running in Call of Cthulhu right now. Like, it's like no question in my head. This should be a Call of Cthulhu game. Holy fuck. This is just straight up Eldritch Horror. Obviously, I don't blame him at all for running in D&D, but this is fucking, they should be taking fucking sanity damage for this shit. This is crazy. I will say, this is tough, and I think in a more normal game, I think this is way more acceptable. But because Liam gave them something to react to here. He, this tears, this, falling snot or whatever. Like, that is something very distinct for Laura and the players to react to. The problem with it in a one-shot, I am seeing is that it doesn't actually progress the plot. It doesn't push the players in a specific direction. Maybe it pushes them away from the canyon, and maybe that's a more significant direction than I'm intuiting, based on like the layout of the Warner Brothers lot, which they all know and I do not. So maybe that is a more significant pressure than it's like reading on camera to me. But to me, that doesn't seem to be a significant pressure, and you see Laura kind of hit on that here.
Open, the sky opened up and then the stuff fell out.
And what do you want us to do?
I don't know.
I'm gonna.
It's like, I don't know. And it's like, what do you want us to do? Because there is kind of nothing they can do about it. They don't even really know if they need to avoid it. They probably do. That's kind of all it's done is maybe provide a constriction on their path. But they were already probably not going through the canyon anyway, because it's a canyon. I thought the aspect of it being a canyon was going to be enough for them to not interact with it. And so I think that's what makes this a little weird is in a normal game where they know more of the rules, they have a more clear-cut objective, and they don't have to get it all done during this session. I think this is totally fine. He gave them something to react to. It's evolving the world, and they have more of a grasp on what they need to do in general. So I think that totally works. But in a one-shot, maybe less so. Maybe less so. Okay, so it actually seems like it's just everywhere. It's not just in the canyon, which is honestly even less to work with. Again, normal campaign where you have a variety of sessions. You have many sessions after this. I think totally works. One shot, less so. Liam is also doing something that Matt has never done that I love. Liam's just saying roll a d20. I call them luck rolls. And so now my table knows a luck roll means a straight d20 roll, no modifiers. And a lot of times I make the luck roll a DC 10. But sometimes I'll play around with the DC a little bit. But it's equivalent to, in my head, I use it for similar purposes as like flip a coin. I just want pure, that is where their skill doesn't matter. I just want to insert some variability into this scene. Now, I think you could very much argue that that's a dex save. Very, very easily argue that. But I think in general concept, luck rolls can be cool and fun, and I like using them at my table.
Towards the cafeteria.
Towards the commissary.
Wait,
So there's not snot on the rooftops. Okay. And maybe I missed something that they intuited that I didn't. Okay, actually, if there is not snot on the rooftops, but there's snot all over the ground, actually really good funneling. I mean, well, I think it brings up some question of like rails versus not, whatever. It's a little bit of a I'd say maybe a clunky way to show the path, but I'm trying to get more comfortable with that because sometimes you need that sort of clunky shit in a one shot. You need, especially if you only have 2 days to prep it, where maybe you can't think of a really nice, really slick way to funnel them in a certain direction supernaturalistically. Sometimes you need them to go in a certain direction because it's a one-shot and you have to get everything done and you only have certain things prepped. And so I don't know if Liam had this sequence and this set piece prepped, but kind of regardless of if he did or not, it's clunky. It's a little bit Rails-y, but I think that that's super okay for a one-shot. If I am now interpreting it correctly. Because at first I thought the snot was just in the canyon, then I thought it was everywhere, and now I think it's on the ground, but not on the rooftops, which pushes them towards the rooftops. Very distinct, some skill challenges. You could easily have a combat up there, and it will, and having it be only rooftops gives Liam a very easy excuse for how and where to funnel them. Yeah. I think it's good if it's the third one. Like I said, a little clunky, but that's fine. Oh my God, something that I need to be better at, that I think the streaming the show and Matt being generally pretty good at it is, in the sake of time, you do this thing. I need to get, that is a part of one-shots that I am terrible at, and that I need to distinctly prep out for myself. I've started calling them shortcuts, or skips, where if the players are taking too long, if we hit a certain like real world time marker and they have not gotten to a certain part of the quest, then I need to have a skip available to get them there. And that is exactly what Liam is doing. Is like for the sake of time, you make your way through the buildings and you get to here. And now I can introduce the next set piece. I think that's good. And even though it feels weird and awkward, at least I feel weird and awkward about it because it's so contrary to a lot of, more traditional campaign DMing advice. I think it's necessary for one-shots. And so I applaud Liam for doing that. This one I don't really blame Liam for, of like the confusion, like where they are and the environment or whatever. He was trying to do a skip, and then the players kind of cross-talked over him and kind of interrupted the description of the next set piece and like the environment. And then he's still like, I think he introduced something to get them back into things and to keep things moving. I think what he really needed to do is get to the end, describe the set piece, and then give them the thing to react to. But I don't really blame him. That's he's already doing something that I struggle to do, so I don't want to critique his execution too much because it's something that I would struggle with. In general, I do think that Liam is under describing and not giving out enough information, especially for a one-shot. Maybe if this was just like a style within a campaign, the players would kind of get into it. They would understand, when they need to ask questions, what types of questions they need to ask. It could be a stylistic thing within a larger campaign, maybe. But I think that overall, especially for a one-shot, Liam is saying a lot of, I don't know, I'm not sure. He's kind of stonewalling a lot of their questions and not really moving things forward. And they're asking about environmental stuff. I think that's the problem, because we just talked about the yes and, the no but, whatever. But that does just relate to actions. And they're asking, like, can I do blank, or is there blank? And he's like, I don't know. You have to get out there. And it's like, okay, well, we don't really know where we are. And this is something that I struggled with when I started DMing Blades in the Dark, when I started DMing a new system that kind of worked a little bit differently. I had a very distinct image in my head of what was going on. And in D&D, my players were used to bridging that gap with me. They knew what I was going to describe, what I wasn't, and we kind of worked into that. But when we started playing Blades in the Dark, we had to kind of relearn that. I had to relearn how much I had to describe, the types of things I had to describe, the types of environmental factors and features that my players were or weren't going to ask about, how strict I was going to be on their imagined placement within the environment. I had to get a lot less strict when we played Blades in the Dark. Because Blades in the Dark never has gridded maps, it encourages you to not lock things down too much. I had to get way better at abstract placement of people. I had to get way, way better at placing them in just abstract locations and not worrying too much about their specific place within those locations. And to me, it feels like that is what Liam is kind of struggling with right now, is he has a really definite idea of where they are, especially because this is such a familiar location to them. And he is not communicating enough of that exact placement, but then he is expecting them to act and behave and ask questions under the assumed exact placement within his imagined scenario. And that's not saying that requiring exact placement is bad. Again, I do a lot more of that when I run D&D than when I run Blades. But it requires a bit more from you as the DM. It's why I often talk about drawing really generic maps like he did with the battle. I don't just use those for battles. I use them for general set pieces, exploration, social. I'll draw out a vague map for anything. Because then players know their placement relative to the surrounding scene. So maybe they don't know exact, but they know if they're inside or outside. They know if there are windows that they can see out. They know where the doors are, generally. They know if there is a door. And so, I think in their heads, they're assuming that they would be able to see the information that would answer these questions. And so they're saying, hey, DM, I think my character would be able to see this info, but I can't because I'm a player and I'm not in the world. But you're the arbiter of the world, so give me the information that my character already probably has. But in Liam's head, there's a disconnect. The character does not have the information that the players think that they do. And so he's just saying, I don't know, you don't have that info. And there's this disconnect because they think they should have that info, which is tough. It's something that you really have to work into as a DM. And I think, and this is what I am learning, especially in a one-shot, even if I was running a D&D one-shot, I need to act more like it's Blades in the Dark. I need to be less strict with exact placement because I need to keep it moving. I cannot have these like small little misunderstandings. I think I'll still do, my general practice of like drawing out the maps and relative positioning. But I need to be even more forgiving because in a one-shot, the pace is everything. And this sort of like stonewalling and requiring exact placement really slows things down.
You look all around, there doesn't seem to be any trapdoors or stairs or, it seems like this is as high as you go in this fake.
And Liam, once they have that disagreement, he's realizing that he needs to give them more info. It's just not what he's starting with. So he's getting there. He's doing the things he needs to be doing, just slower. And it's requiring prompting, which is super understandable. Very incredibly understandable for a first-time DM. I don't want this to be like, fucking Liam has no promise. He's doing great. He's doing really, really good for a 2-day prep and first-time DMing. He's doing awesome. But like I said at the beginning of this, I'm saying a lot of this out loud as more like mental notes for myself the next time I run a one-shot. And this is an example Taliesin is starting to understand. And this is what I mean about like a lot of times DMs and players will start to develop a language of what the DM is going to give up, what kinds of questions players have to ask. And Taliesin's starting to get it. He's saying, I am going to go look outside. What do I see? Not just, is there a path between here and there? Because Liam would probably say, I don't know, you can't see. So now Taliesin has heard it enough times that he's starting to pick up on it of, I'm going to go over to the window, look out, what do I see now? Which, that could be a stylistic thing. And I think that could totally work during a normal campaign. But I do think that Liam needs to be a little bit more lenient during a one-shot. And I think I will need to be a little bit more lenient. Yeah, and you can now see Taliesin's like rolling the questions because he's realized I cannot just ask Liam what I see and he'll give me everything. I have to ask about specific stuff, which I'll say again, I don't recommend generally, but I think it would be better in a campaign than it is here. But even generally, you don't want to especially for like what do I see, like especially for like sensory stuff. When things aren't actively hidden, or even like passively hidden, you should just give them everything that they naturally see. Maybe if you even want to like gamify it a little bit based on their passive perception, you have like 2 tiers of like things that they immediately see, things that are hidden a little bit, and then maybe you have a category for things that require specific questions to notice. But the category of what do they just naturally see should be, I'd say like 70% of it. And then it's like 15% are hidden behind, maybe like a perception check or a passive perception or whatever. And then 15% require distinct specific questions. Whereas this more seems like it's like 80 to 90% require specific questions, which I don't think is great.
And you feel warmth travel up your entire body. All your wounds, clothes, your nipple heals.
What the fuck is going on? Okay. Honestly, fucking lots of good shit. I honestly liked a lot of that. I just like the term voice of power. It is nice and vague, but also evocative. I like the tower as a as a location. It is vague enough that it could be a subversion, or if you're running out of time in the one shot, it could end up just being whatever they choose could be the actual tower. Like the poetic language is vague enough to go really nicely into like the one shot aspect where like, you know, oh, maybe this is the tower now. I don't know. And I like the full heal. I like the full heal. It keeps the pace up without them having to spend too much like in fiction time. And like you have to like get going again. It keeps like not only the out of game pace up, but the in fiction pace up, which I think is good. In especially in like this sort of scenario. The rest of it was kind of weird, but like the entire one shot's been kind of weird. So I, you know, no notes there. It's the shit's just weird. But that's okay. So honestly, just great all around.
And that's where we'll take a break.
Oh! You're killing it! You're killing it!
This is amazing.
You're killing it. I agree. 2 days of prep, first time DMing. Liam's killing it. Obviously, I've said a lot of critiques, but a lot of them are me talking out loud to try and analyze it for you know, other DMs out there, for myself. None of it is a critique on Liam. He's absolutely killing it. He's doing great. I wish my first time at DMing had gone this smooth. I was way worse my first time. Holy shit.
You four have adventured together before, and you'll do it again. You've lived 1,000 lives before this together. You'll live 1,000 more after this. You're living
Dude, it's giving the gunslinger. It's giving the Dark Tower. Oh my goodness. In a very fun, heady sort of way. I like the conceit. I think it's, you know, it's been meshed into the actual like DMing and play to varying degrees of success. But the general conceit is fun. I think it makes sense, but it does feel like Liam is leaning really heavily on like sort of scripted monologues to, you know, deliver the story and the exposition and kind of make up for any amount of social pillar and for a lot of the exploration pillar. The exploration pillar it's definitely been there, which I will fucking give him because it's normally the first pillar that gets dropped, and it's definitely been there to a degree, but he has replaced a lot that would normally come with it with this sort of monologue exposition, and I think that's largely because of the story conceit choice that he made. Like, it's a fun adventure, but it is also an adventure that kind of requires a lot of explaining because it is so kind of off the wall and off kilter. And I think it works for this because, you know, they're just joking around. They're having a good time. It is very specific to them. And I think that if that is the goal, like if you are playing with a bunch of friends, you could definitely get away with doing this, with having most of the prep be like making these little maps and like placing the people in combat, and then just like writing monologues that have a ton of like in jokes and reference a lot of things that you as a group all know and all like and all enjoy. I think that could still be a really, really fun night, a really, really fun time, and it could be a decent way to get your feet wet as a DM. I'm definitely, my perspective on this is definitely looking outside of sort of themed one-shots, maybe gimmick one-shots, if you want to call them that, and looking at more generic ones that try to just distill the experience of playing D&D down to one session, because I definitely don't think that this does that. It doesn't distill down the experience of playing D&D. It's been, like I said, a lot of monologues, not a lot of player choice, although there's still admittedly been some, which is great. So it's hard. I want to really stress this. I think Liam's doing incredible, especially for only having prepped for 2 days. But I definitely think if you want to model the experience of playing D&D, having this heavily themed, this strange of a one-shot isn't really modeling playing D&D. It's more modeling fucking around with your friends, and then you play D&D in small spurts between that. and I think that's like it's more like an intense board game night as opposed to actual D&D. Yeah. Oh, dude. That's awesome. You can see it a little bit in Liam's eyes. That's fucking positive player targeting right there. Liam made these stat sheets. He gave Taliesin chill touch. And so, Talisin's like, is he undead? Because, he takes disadvantage. And Liam's like, oh, yeah, no, I know. Oh, yeah, he does. Because Liam absolutely planned it that way. Maybe who knows what came first? I would assume he probably made the Lich O'Brien and then was looking at spells for the Warlock and thought, oh, chill touch, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's absolutely positive player targeting. Obviously, during an actual campaign, you won't be able to choose the spells, but you can craft combats around strategies that your players like using. To highlight them here and there, if you feel like they need it. Maybe, again, I've said this kind of before, but if they haven't been overly, active the past few sessions, or if they seem to be having a down day, it's little things like that can make them feel really cool and really special.
Oh, come on, you're big old Conan.
Also, I don't know how much the health these guys have, but if they have less than 7 or less, I would just make them minions at that point, which maybe Liam is doing that, where they all have 1 HP. I love Minions, not the movie. The 3.5 rule. I love the Minionize rule. And if these things have less than 7 HP, just make them all minions and make the Lich the real enemy. So it's basically, they hit, still have them roll damage. You don't want them to know that they're minions. If they hit, they basically kill any of the Liams just instantly. It's a really fun way to add more combatants to the fight and to have a fight that really looks very very dangerous, very overwhelming, very intimidating, but accelerates very quickly into the end. Because as they take out the minions, that's one less combatant, basically per attack that hits, obviously. And so we can give this really strong acceleration curve to the feel of the combat as they progressively take out more minions, and it starts to feel like they're getting more and more turns because the amount of enemies taking turns is less and less. So it, like I said, gives this nice accelerating feel that you won't get if you just have, the Lich O'Brien and just have it have, a little bit more health, a la the Umbrasyl fight, right? Single combatant. There's no feeling of movement and acceleration to the fight unless one of you goes down. But with the minions, some people are attacking the Lich O'Brien, getting their health down a little bit. Some people are taking out the minions. Again, it gives this nice feeling of progress and movement to the combat. And then by the time that all of the minions are dead, the Lich O'Brien will still have plenty of health, but it'll feel like you got there and this is the last big obstacle, and because it has some of its health removed, and it has even less because there were all these minions in the combat, you will be able to finish it much quicker than if it had been the only one from the beginning. That is a long-winded way to say I think the Liams are minions, and I love the minions as ways to buff out a combat. I think it gives a great feel, a great texture to the combat.
What did he say?
He said Andy Richter.
You fall to the ground.
Oh!
Instantly.
Stunned.
No save, no nothing.
Nope. You can't move, you can't think, you can't do shit. Taliesin, you're...
Oh wow. I'm going to run towards.
No save? Stunned or dead? Does Power Word Stun have a save? No, it doesn't. So okay, if Travis makes a con save, we'll know. Okay. Power Word, the equivalent of power word stun. I want to make it clear, the reason that power word stun is 8th level has nothing to do with the HP. It has to do with the fact that there's no save. So even if you take power word stun and you drop the HP requirement, you drop it to, I don't know, fucking 50, you cut it in a third, that does not third the level of that spell. If you made it 50 instead of 150 and the rest of the text was the same, maybe 7th level. Maybe 6th level I could even be convinced by, but nothing below 6th. An automatic no save stun is crazy. And they're level 1s. So interesting. The way I'll put this, if you're a first-time DM, obviously you can have flavored custom enemies, but try to use monster stat blocks that already exist. Not to say that like all of those are the pinnacles of balance, but you probably don't know enough about the game to understand when you're reaching into levels of unbalance in your custom monster creation. That's crazy.
Don, you see that red-haired motherfucker go,
Oh, damn.
You know what? I don't even know if I would have done that, but I think that's a fine ruling of someone like using their bonus action to proc you to make a saving throw. It's tough because that sort of situation normally only comes up at higher levels where people have more shit to do with their bonus action. So that's why in my head, I'm like, yeah, that's fine because he's giving up a bonus action. But they're at level 1. So he has basically nothing to do with his bonus action. But also at level 1, they probably shouldn't be having to deal with this sort of effect. So I think it's fine. Oh, and see, this style of Liam's, you see him right there, you know, this kind of information light, we'll say, sort of DMing, works so much better when there's a map. So much better when there's a map. Because, you know, Sam asks, you know, basically what's the status of the dog, and Liam doesn't have to say, you don't know. He just says, well, he's right there. That's all you can see. Infinitely better. Infinitely better. So I think that honestly, if I was talking to, how long ago was this? 8 years ago, Liam, I would tell him to draw more maps. Which I know, crazy advice coming from me. But I think that his style and his desired style, his preferences for how to DM would probably align better and would come off better if there was a map that the players were tracking their minis on, even if it's hyper vague, just a couple of lines drawn here and there. I think it would go way smoother and way faster. Even though you have to take the time to draw it out, I think the time savings overall from like the pacing improvements would vastly make up for that time. So that would be my one takeaway. But obviously this was 8 years ago, and he's killing it. So I would only give that advice if he asked for it, which I don't think he would. But if this was one of my friends and they sent this to me and they said, hey, you know, could I do anything better here? That's probably what I'd say to him. Good on Sam. Good on Sam. Look, tracking initiative is tough. It's tough. It's also why when in the, I believe, I could be misremembering this, but I believe in the Minionize rules, you have them all go on the same initiative count. Kinda for this reason, because it's easy to forget about them. I think you could also have them go on separate initiative counts, but it's hard. First time DMing, tracking initiative is tough. It's initiative is one of those things that I think will be eternally complicated. I have never seen an initiative style that I have been like, this is explicitly better than bog standard 5e initiative. Every single one of them has had trade-offs. It's had things it's better at, things it's worse at, advantages, disadvantages, and it's good to just learn the base because you're probably gonna have to use it. But I don't blame Liam for missing those. It's a tough thing to track, and you just got to get used to it.
I gotta leave something for you guys to do.
Yeah.
I'll shoot at Conan again.
Conan?
Yeah.
5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. Oh, yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Dude, editing me, make sure to play that last part of the clip of Sam being like, I'll shoot at O'Brien. I need to leave something for you guys to do. Actually based and indicative of good combat design. Like, it is interesting that Travis basically has very little way to interact with O'Brien, and that the others need to attack the Lich while he goes around and attacks the Liams. That sort of mixed unit tactics is like good unit choice. It is good adversary design to make some adversaries either weak or specifically resistant to certain tactics or weapons. In this case, he's flying, and so Travis can't get to him. That's good. That's really good. That is how you avoid it feeling like a White Room combat. Like, that is one of the ways. That's one of the strategies, is this mixed unit thing where the units have different strengths to make it more, to make it better for different players to attack different adversaries. You can do that in a ton of ways. You can do that with cover. You can do it with weaponry. You can do it with special abilities or special movements like flight or burrowing. There's all sorts of ways that you can accomplish that. And this sort of is kind of in the same vein as like Shoot Your Monks, but I think it's even more like fundamental to the design, not just to the actual running of it. And I'll be straight up with you. Can I be straight up with you, audience? Barring the Kevdak fight, in terms of just the decision on the different types of units to put into a combat, this is better than every single one of Matt's combats. This is the adversary distribution of like the things that the adversaries are good at, the things that they're bad at, their abilities, whatever. In terms of promoting interesting decisions and special roles for each member of the party, this is a better designed combat than I think every one of Matt's except for the Kevdak fight. And because the Kevdak fight is so far my favorite Matt combat, and it is in a league of its own. It is a far gap between the Kevdak fight and everything else. And this combat is in between the two. Now, there may be other problems, like it ostensibly knowing a nerfed version of Power Word Stun. There are other problems, but in terms of that very specific aspect, I think this has a leg up, just naturally, compared to a lot of Matt's combats. So, huge kudos to Liam for that, for intuiting that, because that is not something that is easy to intuit. That is not something that I just like fucking got into my brain one day. That is the culmination of a ton of experience of doing it wrong and getting a ton of advice in that arena from real life people, from online people. So very, very impressive to see it. And I doubt he was doing it on purpose, honestly. Maybe he was. Maybe he was doing it on purpose. Honestly, actually, I say I doubt it, but he did seem to very purposely give Percy chill touch. He was very clearly thinking about player highlighting. He constructed all of their characters and chose all of their features. So, actually, it's maybe believable that this aspect of it was purposeful, and especially then, fucking mega kudos. For your first session, to think of that, whether or not it was purposeful, to either intuit it or to not intuit it, to very purposefully think about and implement it, huge kudos.
Sure you can.
I mean, this is, I talked about like the well-designed combat, and obviously Laura just, took out the Liam or whatever, which leaves Travis with not a lot to do. Look, it's a good design, but good designs can fall apart at player decision-making. It's like Laura probably should have just gone after the Lich and just left anything, all of them probably should have gone for the Lich and left anything ground-based to Travis. But, frankly, they're not used to that kind of decision-making. That's not really decisions that they've had to make and, like, ways that they've had to think up until this point. So I don't blame Laura because she hasn't had the experience with it. And I will maintain that even though it's not quite working out, it was still a good fundamental design. What? Dude, that's fucking crazy. That's... Dude. This absolutely, like, this to me absolutely proves how fucked the vibes were behind the scene. Like, absolutely proves it. Because I would say, like, they are playing versions of themselves. So this, to me, seems worse, frankly, than the half-chub comment. like Orion's half-chub comment, obviously the vibes were decimated when Orion said that, but the fact that, like, Sam just said, to me, something arguably as bad in a conceit where they are themselves, and everyone cracks up laughing, everyone's having a great time, blah, 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 blah. And when Orion said the half-chub thing, it was fucking doom. It was like, what the fuck did you say? So in a situation where they are playing fictional characters. Yeah. It absolutely proves to me. In a situation where their fictional characters do have love connections with, like, Vax and Keyleth. So it's I have never seen such strong proof, such strong evidence that when Orion was there, the vibes were decimated behind the scenes. That they were the trust with Orion was gone. Because for Sam to make a joke like that and for everyone to, like, be chill and be fine with it indicates, to me at least, a high level of trust. A very high, a high level of trust that is a joke. You know. Because if that trust isn't there, that's crazy, you know, for him to say that. And that the trust, and it indicates to me that the trust was not there with Orion. That's fucking crazy. You know what? He says, help me out, Taliesin. And then Laura says, you know, it seemed like Taliesin and Laura had a rules disagreement. I'm almost positive that Taliesin is correct. But in terms of, like, actual DMing behavior, I think that was solid. You don't know the rules. It's not that obscure, but it's obscure enough to where you aren't going to be able to find it super quickly. Like, you know, just like that. So you get two competing rulings. You go with your gut. You go with what makes sense. Honestly, the standard ruling is weirder than the more intuitive ruling that Laura said and that Liam went with. So I like Liam's decisiveness. He hears the two rulings. He makes a decision. He goes with it, and we move on. Big thumbs up. Big thumbs up. I feel like I'm out of breath after that. I'll say it like this. I'm generally not a fan of scripted losses or scripted wins. I liked the full heal earlier because it was, like, out of combat. It was basically the replacement of a long rest. And the additional HP was sort of interesting, sort of fine. I just kind of ignored it. Adding on more and having two, like, DM NPCs come in, essentially. I don't know. It gives me the feeling that there was no shot they could ever win before, which I think is the case. And that's not a feeling you want the players to have. I think one shot or regular. Yeah. I don't love that. Especially because one shots are like one of the best opportunities to kill people. That came out weird. But to like kill off characters. Like the stakes are so much lower on characters surviving or not surviving that you can do much more interesting combats without really having to worry about their balance too much, which I know I said that. I say that right after critiquing the whole Lich thing, which is still crazy. But more of what I mean is like within reason, you can give them a relatively challenging thing where there's maybe a worry that one or two of them will die. But that's like way more fine in a one-shot environment than in a campaign environment where like it would be much more important for you to like foreshadow the danger and they would be more cautious and they might not ignore like warning signals and they might take more time to prepare in a full campaign. So the players can be more reckless. Both sides of the equation can be more reckless. The players can be more reckless, and the DM can be more reckless. Doesn't have to give as many warnings or as many signals about the difficulty of what they're going into. And if one of them dies, it's kind of fine. So all that being said, the like scripted whole thing that's going on here is a little strange. I can't tell if it's like fudging, like if it is actually scripted or if it's improv. Honestly, if it's improv, it's kind of like the other one where it's clunky, but it kind of works, I guess. Maybe it's better than a TPK. Maybe. At this point, as an experienced person, probably playing with experienced players, I would honestly lean on the side of the TPK. If I designed this combat to be winnable and they didn't figure it out and they get TPK'd, that's how that one shot ends. It's a one shot. But I can understand if you're, first time, you don't want the first one to end on a TPK. Maybe you improv something like this. Okay, actually, honestly, if this had just been a situation of Mercer and Marisha come in and just kill the horse that is allowing him to fly, that is essentially changing the dynamics of the combat. That is, removing this flying barrier that was, a big barrier for some of them earlier. Honestly, that's more okay. Even if it's scripted, if it's improv. To me, changing the dynamics, essentially going into like a second phase of a combat, is much chiller. The full heal, less so. Because it essentially means that it doesn't matter what happened before. I guess maybe in a way there's like, it matters how much damage they managed to do to him in phase 1, and now they're getting full healed, so they're essentially just doing a second combat that was influenced by the first as to how high in hit points Conan is. Maybe that's fine. Like, I can convince myself of it mechanically. Like, I can abstract what just happened enough to make myself fine with it. But I will say the execution and the aesthetics of it, really lean towards, it was never possible in the first place. Scripted death, scripted win. Again, mechanically, I can maybe get there in my head, but the actual aesthetics of it are very wonky to me.
1, 2, 3, 4. He reaches out with skeletal hands at your face, Laura. What's your AC? 13, you say? Okay, you take...
Go.
11 points of damage, and please make a Constitution save.
Wow.
Feel the veins throb in your neck.
Oh no, a 7.
7? Your muscles lock up.
Oh shit.
You can't move.
Oh no.
Damn Irishman, you'll pay for that.
Taliesin, you are up.
Bro, he didn't even take away the paralyzing touch. It seems like he mostly took away all the legendary actions. Seems like he took away all the legendary actions from what I can see. Dude. We'll see. If he did not massively reduce the HP, I honestly don't know what he was thinking if he didn't. We'll see. Okay, so he massively dumped the Lich's HP. Look, I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, if they had fun, that's all that matters. Okay, I am not going to watch the Q&A because this recording went way longer than it will seem. It took a while. I had a lot to talk about. So I'm not gonna do the Q&A. That was very interesting. Matt, I can definitely see Matt's, like, comparatively, I can see, like, Matt's experience, even from the first days in Craghammer, compared to Liam's there. Liam's was a lot more wild, a lot more chaotic, reminded me of my initial sessions. I ain't gonna lie. Back when I didn't know how spell slots worked. He definitely was better than me, just broadly. He had a good... It's so interesting because he seemed to have a good sense of encounter design, but I would say not adversary design, if that makes sense. The adversary design was interesting, but the actual encounter was good interesting. You know, he seemed to have a really good sense of player targeting. He implemented a good skip to keep the pace up. He had an amount of interesting exploration. I think he had very segmented sections, which you could see with the time skips narratively. You know, he had the, like, modern day, the middle day, and then the far future. And I think that having a 3-act structure like that makes it really easy to gauge yourself on the time. It's something I'm going to start implementing into my one-shots. So he did a shitload of things right. And the things that he did wrong are very understandable for a new DM. Incredibly understandable. And honestly, a lot of the things, it gave me a new insight into, like, oh man, that's something that might work in a normal campaign. But I don't think it worked here. It's something good for me to take home. So yeah, all in all, I liked it. If you guys have anything that you want to discuss, obviously the comments are there. Critical Role chat, the chats, plural, are in the Discord. And if there's enough that I want to talk about, maybe we'll do a stream, looking through the comments and talking about the video. Let me know if you liked this, if you liked this format. If there is not a mountain of hatred, I will probably try this again on maybe some other kind of bonus ep type things, maybe on some other actual plays, things like that. I definitely could make it easier on myself. There were some ways that I went about this that weren't quite what I should have done, that I won't go into the details on. But I think, you know, for me, it was successful. I consider it a success. So, like I said, let me know what you thought of what I said, the format, all the above, down in the comments. Like, comment, and subscribe, I guess. And I will see you. For me, it's tomorrow. But who knows when the next time it'll be for you. So I will see you later. Goodbye.